To answer your first question, the first 20 years of Zimbabwe's independence were really phenomenal, in the sense that there was tremendous expansion of education, where we used to have one university in Rhodesia. Now we have 13 universities in Zimbabwe within just 20 years. Now, there was a tremendous expansion at primary, secondary, and tertiary levels, to the extent that UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Cultural and Scientific Organization, said Zimbabwe, by 1994, Zimbabwe was the most literate country in Africa, second only to Tunisia. Tunisia was #1, Zimbabwe #2. Tremendous expansion in education and literacy. The same thing in the area of health. A tremendous expansion in health delivery. A lot of hospitals and clinics and health centers were built, and there was a very discernible improvement in the lives of the Zimbabwean people. But come the land reform program and the response of Britain and its allies, all this almost went into flames, and Zimbabwe just descended down the precipice.
We have a question from member trustee Bruce Hallenbach, who says, why did Mugabe put political cronies on the farms when he removed whites instead of black farmers who might have properly used the land?
Now, in Zimbabwe, the land reform program consists of two, call them sub-programs. There is what is known as A1 and A2. I think A stands for agriculture. A1 and A2. Now, A1 has to do with the getting the vast population of African peasants who were left in native reserves by the Ian Smith government, and giving them land so that they can improve their livelihood. And more than 300,000 families benefited from A1 land redistribution. Now, A2 has to do, maybe this is where the question relates, it has to do with commercial farming. This is business, and this was new territory for the Africans, because before that they were by and large supposed to be in the native reserves. But commercial farming, which is A2, they now have 4,500 farmers, African farmers, where previously there were only about 200 during the time of Rhodesia. Towards the end of Rhodesia, some African farmers were given what you might call large plots in areas called Machivenyika, and but this was nothing compared to the real commercial farming, which was supposed to be the preserve of the white population. Now, 4,500 new black farmers. I think that those who say these are all cronies of Mugabe, there is a question mark there. But it's true that some of the, maybe most of the ministers now have land also. As I understand, in Britain, almost everyone in the House of Lords or in the cabinet also has a piece of land. They were not disqualified. Government ministers, people who are not in government, they've also benefited from the A2 commercial farming scheme.
Mr. Ambassador, this is a very direct question, and with respect from a question of Ralph Lehrman. Number one, how can you, in all good conscience, represent a government with the worst human rights and dictatorial policies in the world during the last 30 years? Number two, what can you tell us about the political opponents that were killed or disappeared trying to contest the elections there?
Well, that's a difficult one. Now, first of all, I mentioned at the beginning of my discourse that I belong to the professional civil service. I'm not a political appointee, and the civil service regulations forbid civil servants from holding political office in any political party. So I don't hold any office in any political party. I'm a professional civil servant, and we're supposed to be apolitical. We serve the party that is in power. It so happened that for the first 27 years, the party that was in power is the one that is being referred to as dictatorial or whatever. So as far as, because there's no country, absolutely no country in the world that can do without a professional civil servant. Politicians come and go with every election, but the civil service continues. And I do not, my conscience as a professional is quite clear. I serve any party that is elected by the people in a free and fair election. But I want to say here, for the benefit of your audience, your esteemed audience, that there have been cases of malpractices in government in Zimbabwe as well as in other African countries. But I think that the Western press has been rather also very, very sweeping in some of the things that it has been saying with regard to Zimbabwe. And I say this to even some of the senior officials in the State Department. The other day, one senior State Department official came to address African ambassadors and talked about the lack of democracy in Zimbabwe. And then I asked him a question which he would not answer. He said, let's finish the discussion. I said, why is it that some of the greatest allies of successive United States governments are the least democratic? If you take, for example, Saudi Arabia, it is ruled by a king. There are no political parties there. They're not allowed. Even women are not allowed to drive cars. In my country, we have women ambassadors. Even as we speak now, we have a deputy president, a woman. We have a vice prime minister, a woman. We have had a woman speaker of parliament before Nancy Pelosi came. We have had, even as we speak now, the speaker of the Senate is a woman. Zimbabwe is a very democratic country. Now, if you look at the MDC of Morgan Tsvangirai, it was formed in 1999. The next year, in 2000, it participated in the first general election, and it won 57 seats. to the ruling party's 66, a mere difference of 9 seats, and making it the largest parliamentary opposition in the whole of Africa in 2000. And as we speak now, they are in the majority in parliament. But in Saudi Arabia, there is no parliamentary opposition. One of the closest allies of the United States government is Morocco and Egypt. In all those countries, there's no parliamentary party politics. So they're not democratic as Zimbabwe. But Zimbabwe is being portrayed here as undemocratic, and he had no answer to that.
Let me add on a corollary to the last question, please, in light of your answer. Sir, you, as a representative of your country, as you stand here now, do you acknowledge that there have been horrendous human rights violations, if not the murder of many, many of your citizens in Zimbabwe within the last 10 years?
There was, I would call it mutual murder. Because what happened was that the MDC of Morgan Tsvangirai had seen a glorious example of seizing power from the street. The Orange Revolution, the Purple Revolution, there are these color revolutions that are taking place in Eastern Europe. And before they reached this global political agreement, they were openly proclaiming that they will seize power from the streets, prompting the government to send in the police to break up such mass demonstration. So there have been, you call them human rights abuses, but there was...
By your government,
yes,
correct?
yes, yes.
To go back to the second of Mr. Lehrman's questions, what can you tell us about the political opponents of your present government that were killed or disappeared trying to contest these elections?
Well, I think that one is very controversial. If you ask the Mugabe party, they will tell you that it was as a result of mutual violence. They have also a long list of their party members that were killed. So it was a situation of incipient civil war. But in the West, what was covered was only the victims of the government. But none of the victims in the ruling party who perished in that violence was ever given prominence in the Western press. So yes, there has been violence. If you ask the ZANU-PF, they have their own list. The MDC, they have their own list of people who perished in that violence, and that's why the SADC and the African Union decided that there is need for an inclusive government, and they were forced to enter this arrangement, which they just celebrated 2 weeks ago. And because since then, the violence has virtually disappeared. This mutual violence has disappeared.